why don't we just open? Why don't you each just take 30 seconds just to tell everyone who you are and what you've been doing for the last 5 years, just so everyone can hear you speak. Why don't you go first, Karthik?
Sure. So I guess my claim to fame for why I'm here is, as Steve mentioned, I wrote this book after meat. So I argue that animals are fundamentally inefficient as a technology for producing goods. And so for that reason alone, we'll eventually transition away from animal agriculture. And beyond writing the book, I've also worked in the plant-based food industry. So most recently, I was the head of data science oh, hey, AJ.
Hi, I'm back. Okay.
Nice to have you back. And
Thanks.
so at Climax Foods, where I was working on making next generation plant-based cheese. And now I work for another company helping bioprocesses make other future food.
Great. Thank you. And Derek, do you want to give us a quick update?
Be happy to. Thank you. So my wife and I live in Richmond, Virginia. I'm Derek Tresize. I am a two-time professional natural bodybuilder. So I'm a professional in two organizations. I've won, I believe, first place 5 times in bodybuilding competitions against Omnivorous. So it's not just vegan only competition. I own a gym here in Richmond, Virginia, which is a plant-based personal training studio, and I train clients. That's my 9 to 5, so to speak. And my wife and I have owned and operated veganmuscleandfitness.com, which is an online blog training website since 2009. Essentially, my claim to fame, to use Karthik's words, is I've been vegan since 2007, so better part of 20 years. I think it's 17 years. And while I was very fit, athletic, and everything before, I gained the majority of my muscle mass since becoming vegan, competed successfully as a bodybuilder as a vegan, have authored a book on preparing for bodybuilding competitions as a vegan. And so that's basically what I've been up to. I've been training clients, learning more about research, learning more about nutrition, staying in shape, and, raising my family.
Okay. And Chef AJ, you want to just give us a 30-second update on who you are and what you've been doing the last few years?
Okay, been vegan almost 50 years, 47 to be exact. I've written 3 books, actually 4 books, including the one that's coming out soon. It's a dessert cookbook with all fruit sweetened recipes. I do a daily YouTube show called Chef AJ Live. I've done it every day since the pandemic began. It's live, and I have wonderful guests. Steven's been on. Most of the doctors you see in this conference have been on. Originally vegan for ethical reasons, but ended up almost 200 pounds eating a junk food vegan diet, lost about 70 pounds. And I try to help people overcome the pleasure trap, lose weight, and manage their food addictions and make healthy food taste delicious, I hope.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a bunch of different questions and you could give us some answers. First, Derek, a lot of us are interested in diet. We talk a lot about diet. We ask a lot of questions about diet. But as I continue to read and listen to what people say, a lot of people, when they talk about real diseases, Alzheimer's, dementia, cancer, heart disease, they seem to be saying that cardio is an important thing. And they also seem to be saying that resistance training, that all of us thought that lifting weights was to look good. And these people seem to be saying there's a relation between serious diseases and the amount of, I guess, muscle you have. So can you clarify what is being said in terms of disease prevention, not physique, but just disease prevention? What type of benefits when it comes to disease prevention do you get from 1, cardio, 2, resistance training, meaning weightlifting or push-ups, and 3, let's also do stretching, because I know a lot of people have hip replacements and knee replacements. So for those of us who are not trying to look any particular way, but we do want to prevent against disease, what are the benefits of 1, stretching, 2, cardio, and 3, resistance training?
So this is a great question because it's for me at least, who's an admitted muscle head and muscle enthusiast. It's very much an emerging field. In the past 10, 15 years, there have been numerous studies that are starting to look at, as you said, what are the long-term health benefits of resistance training? Because we know it's good for muscle mass. We know it's good for strength. We know it's good for athletic performance. That's established. But people have just started asking, like, well, what else is it good for? And everywhere they look, it seems to have a whole host of benefits, sometimes outpacing cardiovascular exercise, which is established as phenomenal for your long-term health. There was one meta-analysis I read a couple of years ago that actually compared the two, and in terms of all-cause mortality reduction, and strength training beat out cardiovascular training a little bit. People who were strength training regularly but didn't do cardio did a little bit better than people who were doing cardio regularly but didn't strength train. And obviously, people who do both had by far the best advantage. But it just goes to show you the mortality risk reduction was on par with someone who doesn't smoke compared to someone who smokes half a pack a day. It was pretty phenomenal. It's all chronic diseases across the board. So there's cognitive benefits for things like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's. There's metabolic benefits. Those are huge. So talking about diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular benefits. One of the first lectures I gave actually at Vegan Summerfest up in Pennsylvania, this was before COVID, so I think it was 2019, was I just started seeing some studies talking about the cardiovascular disease risk benefits from strength training. And this was very new at the time. So I gave a lecture on that. And since then, it's every year there's more and more, and it seems to really positively affect all health systems. You also asked about flexibility. There are some well-established benefits of flexibility in terms of especially psychologically, are the ones I'm most familiar with. I haven't looked as closely at what flexibility training can do for chronic disease, but I've looked at it absolutely does reduce anxiety, reduce stress, lower cortisol levels. And I've seen some things suggesting that it reduces your cancer risk, which I find very interesting. But that could be even just lowering your stress levels is going to have some immune bolstering effects. I know your immune system is very important for reducing your risk of cancer. But I can't speak as well informed about stretching and flexibility as I can about resistance training.
Thank you. Chef AJ, you're well known, or you have a very famous picture of you before and after, and you lost a significant amount of weight. So how much weight did you lose? When did you do it? And then the holy grail of all questions is what do you do that you've kept the weight off completely? What exactly is your diet and lifestyle, and would this work for everyone else?
I think it would work for everyone that would actually do it. So I was obese from the age of 5. I was born in 1960. By 11, I weighed 160 at the height of 5 feet tall. And I pretty much maintained that weight throughout most of my life, getting up as high as the last time I remember really weighing myself was about 180. And I'm 5'5", by the way. And I had lost weight many times. Well, the first time through anorexia as a teenager, don't recommend that. The second time in my 30s with fen-phen, don't recommend that. There was no Ozempic back there. But finally, about 12 years ago, when I was 52 years old, I went to the True North Health Center, not to water fast, actually, and they explained to me basically the things that Dr. McDougall and Dr. Ornish and a lot of these people have been teaching, which is calorie density, which is, what I write about in my book, but basically following the principles in this chart. Dr. Barbara Rolls at Penn State has done so much research on this field. So even though as a vegan, I mean, how could I be so fat as a vegan? Well, because I was eating plants, but I was eating processed plants. And once I switched from a processed plant food diet that had lots of sugar and flour and oil to an unprocessed diet, which was full of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, I could eat as much as I want whenever I wanted. And lose, now I'm probably 70 pounds down from my highest weight. And the thing is, Stephen, it's been I'm not trying to brag, but it's been really easy once I understood this. And once I understood food addiction, that foods like sugar, flour, alcohol, high fat plant foods for some people have this addictive like process. As long as I focus on unprocessed plant foods that are fairly low in calorie density, I can eat in unlimited amounts. And the food is delicious and nutritious, and it's been great because 52 years having an obese BMI, in the last 12 being able to just wear cute clothes and not have knee pain. It's just been wonderful.
Great, thank you. Karthik, from your research and experience, what are the most promising plant-based protein sources that can serve as complete proteins for the future? And why don't you also just give us a little bit more update on where we are with alternative meats? A lot of us know about Beyond and Impossible. We don't know much beyond that. So why don't you give us an update on where we are and where we're trying to get to?
Sure, sure. So I'll first start with the complete protein point. So I think focusing on complete protein is a bit of a red herring. So I think traditionally, if you look at single ingredients and you look at the protein composition and you ask about protein completeness about single ingredients, then yes, you're going to find deficits in various different plants and probably even some animal ingredients. But the thing is, we don't actually eat that way. Like none of us have like a can of black beans for supper, right? We're typically eating, many different things together. And so when we're eating this menagerie of different ingredients, it's very easy to get protein completeness. And in terms of promising ingredients in the plant world, I'm really excited by hemp. So hemp just seems to be coming up a lot in the alternative food space. Hemp seeds, as I'm sure, especially Derek and Chef AJ can attest to, are arguably a superfood. And just the sort of things that we can do in terms of the wondrous foods that we can create out of them, I think is very untapped. I'm also just excited about legumes. So I think if there's a food that's just not consumed enough, it's legumes. And just the things that we can do with legumes, I think, is also going to be pretty wild. In terms of the alternative food space, so I would definitely say there's been a slowdown in the past year or so, especially as funding has dried up from venture capital. So we're not paying as much for the innovation like we used to. But nonetheless, I still think there's been some very nice progress. One product that I'll flag that I've seen more available throughout the United States is Meaty from this company in Colorado, which is using microbial mushroom meat. And I think this is exciting because it gets into territory of foods that don't exactly compare to something like meat. So Meaty, it's protein rich, but it's also fiber rich, right? And so it's really unlike something like that we would eat in the world. And yes, I would recommend eating tofu. My wife and I eat tofu 3 or 4 times a week.
Great. Derek, I had asked you about the impact of stretching, cardio, and resistance training on chronic diseases. In terms of, and now as I'm getting a little bit older, I'm 60, terms like hip replacement, knee replacement, osteoporosis, arthritis, back surgery are more common. Does the stretching, the cardio, and the resistance training make a difference? And will it make an impact on these 5 things, on preventing hip replacements, knee replacements, back surgery, osteoporosis, arthritis, or are these things that we don't have control over?
It absolutely makes a difference. In fact, it's barring diet, it's the most powerful thing you can do. And in this case, in terms of just joint deterioration, osteoarthritis, things like that, it probably has a stronger impact than diet does. Loading your joints, loading your muscles, loading your bones causes your body to reinforce them. They get stronger, they get more resilient. And having well-developed musculature, and we're not talking bodybuilder, we're just talking active people who are using their bodies. It actually takes load off your skeleton. So not only are you getting stronger bones from putting load on them, but as your muscles get stronger, they take more and more of the burden. If you look at someone who's active and has, a healthy muscular system from regular strength training compared to someone who's sedentary, they actually, percentage of how much weight is on their body is carried by their muscles versus their bones. Their muscles take about 70% more load than their bones relative to an inactive person. It's a tremendous difference. So someone who's doing regular exercise, cardio as well, but strength training is going to have stronger bones that also have far less load on them when you're doing regular physical activities. And also in terms of just recovery, if you're getting injuries, if you're getting microtraumas, if you're having impact from just regular repetitive movements, healthier structures that have better circulation and are just more metabolically healthy at delivering nutrients, removing waste, are going to recover faster, heal faster, and maintain themselves better over time. So you're far less likely to have joint deterioration because your muscles are protecting your joints and supporting your joints better. And any sort of wear and tear that does happen is going to heal much more effectively. So it has a tremendous impact. I can't overemphasize that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chef AJ, can you share your thoughts on the concept of cheat days in the context of a whole food plant-based diet?
Well, I think I was asked this during my presentation. I was saying, I think that cheat days in a diet is probably as successful as cheat days in a marriage, or at least for most marriages. I don't think it's such a great idea. I guess it depends what your goals are. But, I always think about Dr. Clapper, who has a famous line, your body is never not looking. And so do you want to live your life with what you can get away with or what is optimal? And the way I see it, Stephen, is once you've neuroadapted, in other words, most people are addicted to the standard American diet or junk food, vegan diet, sugar, fat, and salt. But once you neuroadapt to a diet of whole natural foods without oil and with minimal or no salt and sugar, you enjoy your food as much as you used to, but there's a period of time. It could take several weeks to several months till that happens. And so the problem with cheat days is, you have a foot in both worlds, and eventually you fall. You can't. It's very hard to navigate, because then you never really enjoy either diet, because you learn to enjoy the subtler taste of the whole natural food, but then when you have the junk food, it's like it's hyper palatable and it bangs on your brain. And so I think for most people, especially people that have a health problem, that are overweight, that want to lose weight, or that suffer from food addictions, I think it's a terrible idea. Learn to love the food that loves you back. And then every day is a treat day. I just did a 15 recipe cooking demo for this conference about an hour and a half ago. And I mean, I made amazing, delicious recipes. So I think of them as treats, not cheats. So I think for most people, a cheat day is a bad idea, but I guess there are people maybe that can get away with it. But again, your body's not looking. So that doesn't mean you're not getting harmed from that, So if you're an addict, though, I think cheat days are off the table.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Karthik, how do you balance optimism with realism in advocating for a future that significantly reduces or eliminates meat consumption?
Yeah, so my optimism comes from just understanding the physics of how, we have to feed all this material to this intermediary in the form of animals in order to get this final food. I think any engineer who's actually looking at the numbers will just be aghast at how inefficient this is and wonder, why we wouldn't be able to do better. So that's where my optimism comes from. In terms of my realism, I would say that comes with actually having worked in the space. And one of the unfortunate things is animal agriculture has had a huge head start. So they've had decades compared to, especially thinking about the vegan food movement. And that's all to say that in the long run we'll eventually get there. We'll eventually be able to do better. And yeah, so just being able to know that we can get there, and then also to have the experience of to know that it's hard but doable. That's how I balance the optimism and realism. No, I'm vegan.
Great, thank you. Derek, how do you respond to critics who argue that animal proteins are necessary for peak muscular development?
That's a good question. I hear a lot less of those than I used to, which is heartening. But there's still plenty of trolls on the internet still. Essentially, one of the best studies that you can point to was where they looked at, as a population, are vegetarians, vegans, the same body mass index and the same body composition as omnivores? The answer is no, they tend to be leaner. But in terms of lean body mass, the predictor of who was carrying the most lean body mass, i.e. muscle tissue, was protein intake. It was not animal versus plant whatsoever. So essentially, that means whether or not you're vegan, whether or not you eat animal products, the people who eat more protein tend to carry more muscle mass. And that's independent of exercise or anything else. And that also tells us that plant protein is perfectly adequate at building muscle. You can also look at training studies, with protein matched and exercise volume matched training studies. A plant-based protein source is just as effective at stimulating muscle protein synthesis, at causing adaptation and resistance training. I myself, my experience has been I had to eat a little bit more after becoming vegan than I did as an omnivore. And I actually liken that to just an increase in my metabolic rate. I immediately lost body fat after transitioning to a vegan. And granted, this was, 17 years ago, but I had to eat a little bit more to maintain my weight and to gain muscle mass, but I had no problem gaining muscle mass. I was able to gain as much as I wanted. And that was actually an advantage because then dieting to get super lean for bodybuilding competitions became easier. I was able to eat more food while losing body fat, maintaining muscle mass.
Thank you. Chef AJ, you mentioned conquering cravings in your book. What strategies do you suggest for managing cravings for unhealthy foods?
So first, I need to know what the cravings are for. But in general, the answer is don't have the thing you're addicted to or that you crave in your environment. Make it difficult. Put a barrier between you and that item. So, for example, if you're an alcoholic, whether you've gone to rehab or not, it's probably not a good idea to have alcohol in the house. You can't help the fact that the world has alcohol, but you don't have to have it in your house. It's very hard, though, with food because we don't have to have cigarettes or alcohol or recreational drugs, but we have to eat at some point. But we have a choice of what we eat. And when you eat these hyperpalatable pleasure trap foods, they say they bang on your brain. They cause you to want to eat more of them. They don't have the same satiety as whole natural foods with the fiber, water, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants, and micronutrients. But I have a saying that I'm known for, which is if it's in your house, it's in your mouth. And you have to make it so that it's not easy for you to get those foods. Cravings are like an itch. And the thing is when you have an itch, you want to scratch it, but it doesn't necessarily make the itch go away. Often it makes it worse. And when you indulge a craving, people think, well, if I indulge the craving will go away. It actually intensifies the craving. So sometimes you have to learn some strategies or techniques of delaying or redirecting. So every time you don't indulge that craving, that's what willpower is, by the way. And it's a short limited, it's a time limited resource, willpower, which gets depleted throughout the day. But every time you don't indulge that craving, you make it stronger. But I would argue that cravings for unhealthy food, and I believe Dr. Furman either has been or will be a speaker on the summit, he talks about that. It's often micronutrient deficiencies because if you're not eating enough plant foods with good nutrient contents like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, what your body is actually seeking these micronutrients, but people confuse that with hunger, and then they eat more macronutrients, hyperpalatable foods with high caloric value, but they're never really satisfying their fiber or nutrient intake. One of the things I've found that's been very successful for myself in my journey and many of the people I've worked with is vegetables, especially green vegetables, because they have a compound in them called thylakoids, which have been known to actually turn off the hunger switch and fight cravings for these hyperpalatable foods, particularly sugar. They even block fat absorption. So, if you're craving sugar, as weird as it sounds, steam some greens. But sometimes you do have to go through some discomfort if you're having cravings. Sometimes cravings are psychological too. They're not just physiological. It can be a combination, but that just shows you that food addiction is real because, if your craving is for, a sweet potato and broccoli, indulge it. If it's for, a hot fudge sundae, there could be some emotional stuff going on. It's a kind of a complex problem, and to give my short answer probably doesn't do it justice. But just whatever the question, kale's the answer. Eats greens.
Thank you. Karthik, just to clarify, when we're talking about alternatives to beef, chicken, fish, and dairy, there's two versions. There's the alternative meat, like made of pea protein or what Beyond Meat and Impossible makes. And then there's the clone meat, which is actually supposed to, I don't know the terminology, but make actual meat. So how close are we to scale of either of these?
Yeah, so the former, which I would call like the mimics. So that's taking either plant or microbial ingredients to make something that tastes or has the texture of, say, chicken. I'd say for most of the food categories, we're basically already there. So for fluid milk, I would say we're pretty close. For like things like chicken, for things like beef, we're also pretty close. We're a little further away on things like cheese or steak. And for the other technology, so the cultivated meat technology. So that's where we take the stem cell of, say, a cow and then grow that cell into like a full cut fillet. And that technology, I think, is still quite far away. So I think if I'm being forthright, I think it's still decades, and we even might not get there after decades.
So in terms of anything soon that's going to save the environment, it would be the Impossible and Beyond type burgers that are made of alternatives, not actual cloned meat or something.
Yeah. I think the best is, as I'm sure Derek and Chef AJ would advocate, is to convincing more people to do whole foods plant-based. And then, for people who actually do need that, that meaty craving or sensation, for something like an Impossible Burger.
Okay. Derek and Chef AJ, we got a couple of things going on. First, there are statistics saying that something like, I don't know the exact number, but something like 40% of the country, the United States, is obese. It depends where you look at the number, but it's in that range. Sometimes it's a little lower, 35 to 40, but something around 40%. Then you have a new phenomenon. I don't know exactly all over the country how it is, but in New York, the use of these drugs like Ozempic to lose weight has become, I don't know how popular it is, but it seems extremely popular. The value of the company that makes it in Europe was something like the most highest market cap of any company in Europe or something. I might have that wrong, but something close to that. So what do you do when people come to you and say, hey, I'm obese and I really want to go on these new types of drugs? What exactly is your advice to them? What do you say to do? What's your recommendation?
Well, they're very tempting because you lose weight much more quickly, obviously. And I don't think a lot of people are in this for the long haul. What a lot of people don't realize, unless they've followed my journey, is it took me 27 months to lose my weight, but I've kept it off for 12 years. And I did the fen-phen, and the minute the FDA took fen-phen off the market, the weight that I had lost, which was about 60 pounds, came back like with a vengeance and then some. So what I would say to people is whatever you do to lose weight, whether it's a whole food plant-based diet, Ozempic, gastric bypass, whatever you do, you have to continue to do after you've lost the weight. And so my understanding is with Ozempic, as beautifully as people claim it works, it's expensive, but even if it wasn't, you have to take it forever. And that's a person's choice. And the thing is that the cost, from what I understand, is astronomical. And, last time I checked, potatoes were pretty cheap, and you could probably get the same results just eating potatoes, like Dr. McDougall says, and broccoli, but it's not going to happen as quickly. So I don't think you can talk people out of it, because people are looking for a pill for every ill, a potion, a procedure, a quick fix. But I find in general, they don't work. And my concern is that while it seems very seductive right now to take these drugs because celebrities are taking them, what I'm seeing in a lot of people is that their success is like my before picture. That I mean, and I'm not trying to be mean about that, but it's like, yes, they've lost weight, but they're still really barely at a normal BMI. They're not as lean as the people that I see that eat the way that we recommend. So I guess it just depends what your goals are. For a lot of people, I think it's an excuse to continue eating crap, because basically, when I was on fen-phen, it was great. I could eat whatever I want because it tricked my brain into thinking it wasn't hungry. So I could keep drinking my Dr. Pepper and Coke Slurpees, but less of it. So I think a lot of people, unfortunately, Stephen, are looking for trimness and slimness more than they are health. But I've always said, if you follow the diet that makes you healthy, which is a whole food plant-based diet, eventually the weight loss will come. So I would say I would try to advise them against it, but I think the people that want to do that are going to do it. And so hopefully there won't be any long-term repercussions like there were with fen-phen, which created a hole in your heart and lung. But I don't think it's been really tested for weight loss all that long. And I think one day the shoe is going to drop, and then, they'll be right back where they were.
Thank you.
I agree with everything Chef AJ said. Most of what I've heard about Ozempic has been word of mouth. Actually, I've not talked to many experts or clinicians about it. But it does sound like many people I've talked to, they have a friend, a cousin, a relative who's using it now, or several. Um, and I absolutely agree. It seems short-sighted to me. And from what I hear, it even barring the nutrition part and barring the long-term health part, it sounds like quality of life, it has a negative impact because from what I hear, it makes you feel lethargic. It makes you food sound gross, and it turns that whole part of your life that can be a joy of having a great food and breaking bread with friends and having experiencing all these exotic flavors and feeling vital and energized from good healthy food. It turns that into kind of this gray, like, oh, I don't want to eat. So, and then just as a chef AJ said, it's a way for people to keep eating these bad, rich, addictive foods that are malnourishing people already. Now you're eating way less of them on top of this risky prescription drug. So health-wise, that can't be a good situation. So you're having less of this really processed food that's already not giving you what your body needs. You're putting more stress on your body. And it's very much unsustainable. Yes, I'm sure people are seeing results with it. That's not a question. And I'm sure people are going to continue trying it because everyone wants that easy fix without having to apply themselves to change their habits. But the second you stop, the second it gets pulled from the market because it's dangerous, or the second you decide that, you're tired of hating eating, then the weight's going to come back. So it's not a sustainable strategy.
Thank you. Karthik, Jeffrey Smith, who speaks about GMOs, has pointed out that there is a GMO ingredient in Impossible Burgers. What is the general health profile of these alternative meat burgers? Are they a health food? Are they better than a real burger? Are they the same? Is it unknown? Is there any information on this?
Yes. Yes, actually, there's been quite a bit of work on this. And comparing to a classic beef burger, there's no question an Impossible Burger is healthier. It's got it's got less of like all the bad things. It's got less saturated fat. It's it's got more of the plant vitamins, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting some of the other specific metrics, but the last I saw, it's pretty unassailable. The only thing that it doesn't compare well on is salt content. Of course, it's no substitute for chickpeas or kale, and so if we're judging it on that sort of scale, yeah, of course, it's not going to be healthy. But I think if we're asking the question if it's going to replace a beef burger, I think yes.
Okay. Derek, what are the most common misconceptions about veganism and bodybuilding you encounter, and how do you address them?
There's still, and I know this was a previous question, kind of, there's still a misconception that plant proteins are incomplete or inferior. And if you look at them amino acid by amino acid, you can make a case for that, like branched chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine, which are regarded to be the best at stimulating muscle protein synthesis. But nutritional reductionism in any regards to health, I think, it gets you caught in the weeds, and it's much more useful to zoom out and look at what actually happens when people eat these diets. And so if you just see people following plant-based diets, as I mentioned in a previous question, studies show that people eating similar amounts of protein have similar amounts of lean body mass. People who strength train and supplement with similar amounts of protein, plant or animal, see similar amounts of muscle gain. So while you can make a case, oh yeah, that amino acid is going to be less in plants and therefore it's going to be inferior because this amino acid in a petri dish has these effects. When you look at people actually eating the food, doing the exercises, they're seeing the results. So that's a misconception that I think is largely unfounded, and I definitely encourage people to look at more of epidemiological research than like a clinical or biochemical research. Other misconceptions could be things like micronutrients like B12, iron, or even creatine. But the ironic thing about those is bodybuilders are some of the biggest supplement pill poppers in the world. They take protein supplements. They take piles and piles of performance supplements. They take health supplements. So if you're going to to already be supplementing your diet as a bodybuilder than worrying about people having to supplement, say, B12 as a vegan is kind of silly, you know. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I've never had any problem with B12. No vegan I've ever met has had a problem with B12 as an example. But it's if you're going to be a bodybuilder, you're going to take supplements, then why would you complain about someone needing to take supplements for any other kind of way of eating, especially when the results are similar and there's very marked health benefits that are well established in the literature.
Thank you. Chef AJ, in your book, you discuss the importance of whole foods. Can you explain the difference between whole and processed foods in the context of weight loss?
Sure. Well, just to differentiate, a whole food is generally something that is found in nature in its whole food form. And a non-whole food or processed food is something that's not. So in other words, one comes from a plant, one is manufactured in a plant. But in terms of weight loss, there's several reasons that whole foods are superior to processed foods. And also, I'm not sure the word processed is the best word, because if I put, chickpeas in a food processor with lemon juice and garlic and tahini, I'm processing it into hummus, but I'm not really taking anything out. I'm not stripping it of vital nutrients. So I think about refined food is being ultra processed food. So there's a little bit of a difference there. But in terms of weight loss, whole foods, with the exception of nuts and seeds, which are of a very high caloric density, in general, the whole foods are very low in caloric density. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, they have between 100 and 600 calories per pound. Whereas processed foods, things like sugars, flours, alcohol, these are much higher caloric density. So sugar is 1,800 calories per pound, flour about 1,500 calories per pound, oil 4,000 calories per pound. When you think about it, if you take olives, that's a whole food found in nature with water, fiber, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants, micronutrients. They're about 600 calories per pound. You process them into olive oil, you remove all the beneficial components. It's now 4,000 calories per pound. You take sugar beets, which are about 195 calories per pound, process them into cane beet sugar, 1,800 calories per pound, 9 times as calorically dense. So anytime you process a food, you make it calorie rich, nutrient poor, but you exponentially increase the calorie density. Now, there are things that are healthy whole foods that can have increased calorie density, not from processing. So for example, you could take apples, which are about 200 calories per pound, but you dry them into dried apples, another 1,300 calories per pound. You're removing the water. So anytime you remove the water or remove the fiber or both, you're increasing calorie density. So if your goal is weight loss, but even I would argue health, you want to eat your foods as much as possible in their wholest forms with the water and fiber and nutrients intact, and either eliminate or minimize the animal products and processed foods, which are of a much higher caloric density. Animal products, by the way, are much higher in caloric density than fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. And so people think they're healthy, which I don't believe they are, but they're also calorically dense, especially things like, salmon and pork and cheese, 1,600 calories per pound. And we evolved at a calorie density much lower than that, according to evolutionary psychologist Dr. Doug Lisle, at about 750 calories per pound. So, nature didn't make a mistake. And if all you ate was unprocessed foods, it would be very, very difficult for somebody to have a weight problem. Eat foods that are found in nature, and eat plants, fit into your pants is the bottom line.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Karthik, can you discuss any recent breakthroughs in the field of cultured meat that you find particularly exciting or promising?
Yeah, I'll talk about 2. So one is recent news that actually just occurred this week. This company Vow got approval for quail meat in Singapore, and I find this really cool because the first few companies have focused on things like chicken, and it just doesn't really make sense to me. Chicken is already, this mass produced meat, and it's just going to be so hard to actually work at a techno-economic scale. And so this other company went for something that was much more, I guess, desirable in terms of quail meat. And so I thought that was an interesting play. So that's one. The other is pet food. So as I'm sure everyone here knows, the consternation with getting cats vegan, and while I think it's definitely possible with just plants, I know not everyone has accepted that. And so I think one of the biggest impacts cultivated meat can make is with especially cat food. And I actually had the chance to meet a friend a couple of weeks ago who was talking to me about some of the breakthroughs recently with some of the seafood in using cultivated meat technology. And already right now, it seems like we're close to being able to get something to package for cats that they can eat and get a nutritionally complete diet from.
Thank you. Derek and Chef AJ, if someone had no oil, no nuts, no seeds, no olives, no avocado, and they just ate beans, whole grains, not even pasta, just actual beans and whole grains like quinoa, millet, amaranth, teff, buckwheat, wild rice, beans, meaning chickpeas, lentils, white beans, lima beans, black-eyed peas, and vegetables and potatoes. Would they gain weight? Could they gain weight? Could they be overweight and obese? Like, what is your experience with people that literally just eat nothing but beans, whole grains, vegetables, and potatoes? Does it always work that their weight is okay? Are they sometimes overweight? What do you find?
I've never seen anyone that eats the way I eat or recommend that's been obese. Now, will everyone be super, super skinny? There is a genetic variable in how we could all four of us right here could go to the True North Health Center and eat exactly the same food, and we're going to end up different sizes because genetics is really the number one determinant of what you weigh. Let's face it, look at your parents, your grandparents, that kind of thing. I mean, I come from a morbidly obese lineage. And that's why if you saw the people that came before me, you'd be like, you didn't come from this family. My mother probably weighed 300 or 400 pounds, as did my brother. So this did not come naturally. So I think that there's always going to be people that are outliers that for either due to emotional eating or some reason could eat more food than they need, because let's face it, calories do matter. And if you put in more fuel than your body needs, it eventually, even the healthiest food gets stored as fat. I have never seen anyone who was maybe more than 10 pounds than they wish they could be eating the way I eat. So, is it possible? Probably. Is it likely? No.
Yeah, I would answer exactly the same way. Technically, it is possible because if you have a big enough caloric surplus, you will store body fat. But getting that big of a caloric surplus with whole plant foods that are not high in fat, like the nuts and seeds and avocados, would be a lot of work. I can speak from personal experience. The very first time I tried to really bulk up over 200 pounds, which was about 12 years ago now, I tried to do it with as many whole foods as possible because I value my long-term health. I wanted to perform well and everything. It was incredibly challenging. And I wasn't eating perfectly whole food diet, but I was eating vast majority whole plant foods. I got up to about 7,000 calories a day, which is a lot. And it was no fun whatsoever. I gotta tell you. And I was able to gain that weight. So it was possible eating primarily whole plant foods, but it took a massive surplus because of all the, metabolic stimulation of a high fiber diet and the good microbiome and stimulation, all that. Your metabolism is just humming along on these whole plant foods. So you have to have a pretty big surplus for it to cause any sort of weight retention. It's not something I could ever have maintained for a long period of time. So an average person would have to work very hard, I think, to gain any significant amount of weight eating that. And if they didn't have a really good reason to, I don't see it happening.
Okay, Karthik, how do you address concerns about the potential monopolization of the meat alternative industry by a few large corporations and its impact on innovation and consumer choice?
Yeah, Steve, this is a really good question and a really important point. I think I think the biggest thing is we have to get more innovation on the academic and government side. I think we can't have a situation where we're letting venture capitalists fund all of this research, fund all of this innovation, allowing these companies to have patents, basically preventing other competitors becoming huge conglomerates. We don't want more Nestle's. What we want is more recipes, and we want these recipes to be in the public domain. And we want to enable multiple food producers. We want to enable artisanal food producers, and so I think the key to this is just having more innovation on the public side.
Thank you. Derek, do you have any thoughts on nutritional supplementation? So someone says, okay, I saw this lecture tonight, seems great. I'm going to eat beans, whole grains, vegetables, potatoes, fruit. In terms of nutritional supplementations, is there, do you have a thought on what you feel is what is critical, or what is your general recommendation? Do you have any?
Absolutely. I would say that you can get all of the nutrients you need for optimal health from whole plant foods, with the exception of vitamin B12, vitamin D if you don't get enough sunshine, and possibly essential fats like EPA and DHA. So all the vitamins A, C, B vitamins aside from 12, all the minerals, everything are readily available in whole plant foods, as are macronutrients, so the proteins, different amino acids, fatty acids, things like that, omega-3s. They're, by definition, whole plant foods are incredibly nutrient dense. So if you're getting more of your calories from those, you're getting more nutrition than the average population is. That being said, for example, in the wintertime, I will get us a good food for the family. I will get us good food-based multivitamins because we're eating less fresh produce. We're having more frozen, dehydrated produce. We're having more, other things like that. More of the grains and beans and less of the fresh garden herbs and vegetables because it's the middle of winter. We're also getting less sunshine. So typically for the family, I'll bring a multivitamin into our regimen during the winter months. And then as soon as right around now hits, we won't have that anymore. That's on the health side of things. On the performance side of things, again, whole plant food is everything you need. You can perform at a very high, even elite level on whole plant food. So nothing is required. But there are some pretty well validated supplements, like for example, a protein supplement, not necessary, but it is shown to improve recovery post-exercise in terms of muscle repair, muscle protein synthesis. So if that's a really big goal you have, then you can have that. But given that it's a highly processed food, I would say it's not necessary, and I don't really recommend it unless people want to have it or choose to have it on their own. I now hardly ever have refined protein powders, whereas I used to live off of them when I started my bodybuilding journey. I used to have a ton, and now I have almost none. Creatine monohydrate, that's been an interesting one because it's been a sports supplement for years and years and years now, going on 30 or 40 years. But it's just started to enter kind of the health and wellness space because more and more research is coming out on how it has a myriad of effects on health. If someone chose to take creatine for performance or for long-term health, I would just say make sure that you're getting something that's third-party tested and certified, third-party tested, because a lot of the supplement industry is unregulated. So you want to make sure you're getting something that is what the label says it is. Other supplements, I wouldn't really even mention any others. The vast majority of it is just ways to extract money from your wallet with questionable ingredients, questionable results. So the bottom line is whole plant foods are going to give you all the benefits, none of the risks. And for someone looking to add supplements to that, they're few and far between.
Okay. If anyone in the audience would like to ask a question, please go to the reactions tab and click the raise your hands. Chef AJ, what is your advice for someone who feels overwhelmed by the idea of overhauling their diet for health and weight loss?
Well, the first thing I'd say is why do they want to do it in the first place? We talk about often finding your why, and I love how Dr. Rosanne Alviera talks about the why that makes you cry. If it's overwhelming to do everything, I always believe that just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything. And so you might not be able to run a marathon tomorrow, but you can maybe walk around the block. So approach the diet the same way. If you're not under the threat of a surgeon's knife or having to go on insulin, then you have more time to transition slowly. Not everybody can or should do it overnight. So listen, let's say most people eat 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, 21 meals a week. What if you just start with breakfast? What if you start with 1 meal a day and make it a healthy plant-based diet? You know, I don't know what you're eating now, but let's just say, for example, it's an Egg McMuffin or something, or a Pop-Tart. What if we have, you don't have to be like me and have vegetables, but what if we had, you know, oatmeals with blueberries and bananas and maybe some dates in it, or a green smoothie, or even a chocolate green smoothie? So just start with 1 meal a day and keep adding. See, I believe in addition rather than subtraction, because when you take things away from people, they don't like it. You know, when you tell me you can't, oh, you can't eat meat, fish, fowl, eggs, dairy powder, oil, flour, sugar. No, instead of taking that approach, which some people need that approach. Some people are very sick, you know, and they need to be kind of hit over the head by Dr. Alan Goldhammer. But the average person, just start making some substitutions. What about, for example, just switching a plant milk for a dairy milk? You know, just start somewhere. And then just keep adding and find ways to add more fruits and vegetables to your diet, however that looks to you, whether that's a green smoothie, whether that's a salad, you know, whatever you're doing now, just do a little bit more, and each day try to do a little bit better. And also, you know, hang around people that eat like the way you want to eat. You know what I mean? That I think the social environment is one of the most important things if you're going to be healthy long term, whether it's with exercise habits or eating habits. You know, when you go through rehab for alcoholism, you don't hang out in the bar anymore with your friends. Get new friends that support healthy lifestyle habits, meetup groups, conferences like this, people meet in the chat, and just make progress every day. You know, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Make it delicious, make it fun, but do it.
Thank you. Karthik, in your opinion, what are the most significant scientific hurdles still to be overcome in the creation of meat alternatives?
Yeah. So I think one is having something that stretches like dairy protein. So dairy cheese has this stretch and melt characteristic that's been really hard to find in the plant world, and it comes from casein protein. And so some companies are trying to make this casein protein using microbes, and then other companies are trying to look in the plant world to see if we can find something like it. And so I think that will be a huge breakthrough. The other big hurdles are just scaling. So a lot of these companies have been really good at making something that works at a small scale, but it's very expensive and not enough to actually displace out a significant number of animal products. And so, of course, just getting bigger and bigger scale and cheaper scale is also a necessary hurdle.
Thank you. Cindy, would you like to ask a question, and where are you from?
I'm from Champaign, Illinois, and I just wanted to ask about going out, because I agree socializing is so important. I have pretty much no friends whatsoever that eat vegan, and I've been doing that for about 6 months, and I find it extremely difficult to go out to eat.
Yeah, I wrote a chapter in my book, The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss, about that, and it can be difficult. There's some tips and tricks. I am very blessed now to live in a place where people before me, because there's so many vegans, worked with the restaurants to not only have vegan options, but to have oil-free options and even sometimes SOS-free options. But before that, a couple of things you can do, Cindy, is if a restaurant has more than, like, I think it's 3 locations. If it's a mom and pop restaurant, this won't happen. But if it's like a Chili's, TGI, you know, one of those restaurants, Subway, their nutritional information, even McDonald's, has to be online. So what you can do is you can look at the menu and try to navigate the menu the best you can. Now, there are some menus that say no substitutions, which makes it difficult. But what you can do is, for example, if a menu has a Santa Fe burrito with beans and cheese and rice, you might be able to get beans and rice at that restaurant. You know, we can't guarantee that it's not cooked in oil, because one of the most interesting things I've learned from hosting the Truth About Weight Loss Summit is that restaurants do not have to put the amount of oil used to cook the food in the nutritional. So in other words, if there's oil in the, I know, Derek, it's scary, because if you go like this, you could have 600 calories from oil. That's like 14, 20, 56 more grams of fat. they don't have to account for that in the sauteing. They have to say what's in the recipe, not what's in that. And so that's why you get more sugar, fat, and salt in a restaurant than you ever do. But if you can find, the pandemic kind of hurt these types of restaurants like Supplementation. But if you can find those kind of restaurants like a Whole Food salad bar or Supplementation, that can be very helpful. Believe it or not, Wendy's has baked potatoes. So it's a question of trying to find the restaurants that serve the kind of food, or sometimes even talking to them. When I lived in LA, I worked with certain restaurants to get the oil out of many of their dishes. But sometimes if you talk to them and just say, look, I hear such great things about your restaurant, but I have a special diet, doctor's orders. Could you do that? I mean, sometimes they're willing to learn to do things without oil. They actually save money. The other thing that sometimes you just have to pre-eat. It is hard, Cindy, and I feel you. So sometimes you either gotta like move to a place like I am where it's been done for you, or just talk to them, because a restaurant will make healthy food if people will eat it and buy it. But I agree, it is much harder to eat out than it is at home and to stay healthy.
Yeah, thank you.
You're so welcome.
Derek, could you discuss any studies or research that contrast the health outcomes of vegan athletes with those on omnivorous diets?
Specific to athletes, I don't think I've seen any research about long-term health. I've seen research about athletes compared to lay people and vegans and omnivores, but I've not seen the two overlapped in any like large meta-analysis, anything like that. But I do know that even at healthy body weights, even at high activity levels, people eating a standard American diet, like say for example, competitive marathon runners, things like that, still can show very significantly developed arteriosclerosis, arterial plaques, things like cardiovascular disease, versus you can have someone who's not very active on a whole food plant-based diet, hardly says all, has very low cholesterol level, no signs of cardiovascular disease. And so while exercise is very powerful at lowering your risk of all chronic diseases, extending your life and improving your quality of life, I would say diet is definitely more so, because even with healthy and even intense levels of exercise, you can still progress many of our leading killers on a bad diet.
Thank you. Chef AJ, you interview more plant-based doctors than almost anyone on the planet. You might do the most interviews with whole food plant-based experts and doctors of anyone. So if anyone's not familiar with Chef AJ's YouTube channel, it's fantastic. You do the interviews yourself. You sit there, you listen, you're the student at the same time that you're doing the interview. Are there any common themes that you can say, like, now that I've been doing this all these years, it seems very clear that I'm not going to smoke cigarettes. Aside from that, is there anything else that just seems to be clearer than ever from all these interviews that you want to pass on to us?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that there seems to be at least now a consensus on, because people in the plant-based world, they argue about oil, they argue about, even coffee, nuts. I've really never had a doctor come on, and not everybody on the show is a vegan or plant-based doctor, that said, alcohol is great. It's just going to extend your life. It's just going to make you a better person. I've not yet interviewed that doctor that is telling people to go drink alcohol. So that's one thing. And of course, you could say the same about cigarettes. And I've not had a single guest on that says processed food is good for us. I used to have a button a long time ago: processed food is not healthy for children and other living things. When you think about it, there's only three species in the history of the world that have ever been overweight: human beings and their domesticated dogs and their domesticated cats. And what do these three species have in common? They're the only species that eat processed food. You never see an animal in nature, whether it's a carnivore or an omnivore or an herbivore, that is overweight, because they're eating the diet consistent with their natural species. So we could argue all day whether we're supposed to eat animal products. I think if we are, very minimal, but nobody needs to or should be eating processed foods. And on that, I do believe the experts agree.
Thank you. Karthik, looking to the future, what are your hopes and predictions for the role of meat alternatives in global dietary patterns over the next decade?
Yeah, I am hoping for a trajectory similar to what we've seen with the milks. So if the audience, and I'm sure Chef AJ and Derek recall, even 10 years ago, you go to your local coffee shop and you think about all the plant-based milk options that you had. And it was quite scant. You were lucky if you got soy milk. And fast forward to today, and we have all sorts of options, right? Even Starbucks has probably three different plant-based milk options. And so I'm hoping for a similar trajectory with the other animal product alternatives. So we go to a restaurant and, we can have our assortment of, two different plant-based chickens, let's say, or beef and so forth.
Thank you. Derek and Chef AJ, we talk about health a lot because that is what our audience is interested in. In terms of your choice to eat whole food plant-based diets, is this motivated by health? Is there an animal component, the animal cruelty? Is there an environmental component? What is I guess all three of you can answer this. Karthik, you also eat a whole food plant-based diet. So all three of you, is this all about health? Or is it partly about the cruelty to animals? Is it partly about the environmental impact? If each of you could answer that. Derek, why don't you start, then Chef AJ, then Karthik.
Sure. I initially made the transition purely for selfish health reasons. I will absolutely say that. I was the guy who made fun of vegetarians. I ate the cowboy steak at the restaurant. I was a deep sea fisherman. So I was not motivated by animal welfare or the environment. I was very much motivated by health. Heart disease and cancer run rampant in my family, and I've always been a health enthusiast. As I spent time feeling better, performing better, and just enjoying the benefits of a whole plant-based diet, the energy level, etc., it really struck me how wasteful it is to be causing all this harm, all this suffering to animals. And especially as climate change has continued to visibly progress in my lifetime, which is not that long, it just is inarguable that we need to be more efficient. We need to be conserving our resources as much as we possibly can. So while it was initially very much a health decision, and it still is, I am in the health field, health is my passion. I very much appreciate, why would we be causing all this suffering, all this harm, slaughtering all these billions of animals just to harm our own health? And why would we be using vast quantities more resources than we have to in order to harm animals and our own health? It just does not make any sense. So for me, it's a very well-rounded, the most logical way to live your life.
Thank you.
So I became vegan on September 1st, 1977, and nobody was talking about the environment then at all. And we didn't have an internet back then. So for me, it was purely ethical reasons at first. However, 26 years of being vegan, I was obese, and I actually, believe it or not, had the beginning of colon cancer. And so then I learned that when I changed my junk food vegan diet to a whole food plant-based diet without oil, that I was able to reverse my disease without having drugs or surgery. I had these precancerous polyps that literally disappeared. This was even before the movie Forks Over Knives came out. So then I realized, hey, it's not just great for animals so that there isn't animal cruelty, but it's really great for one's health. And so I'll be honest, if some study came out tomorrow by, I don't know, Walt Willett or somebody, that's known in the nutritional space saying, eating meat, you won't get cancer, you'll live longer, I'm still not going to do it, because I live my life in accordance as much as I can with the principles of ahimsa, to do no harm. I mean, I'm not perfect. I don't necessarily check every beauty and makeup product as good as I should, but for the most part, it's for me all about compassion. But it just so happens that the diet that is the most compassionate for the animals is the best for human health and planetary health and for weight loss. I'm just amazed that more people don't do it. And it's also delicious. By the way, this is the other thing people don't understand, because they're so stuck in the pleasure trap and addicted to sugar, fat, and salt and animal products, particularly cheese. The food is delicious. None of us here, none of the doctors that have come before us would be able to stick to something if it wasn't delicious. It's amazing. So I hope people will give it a try.
Thank you.
Yeah, I actually first started with environmental. So I first went vegetarian 17 years ago because I had the sense that being vegetarian was better for the environment. And then fast forward about 10 years after that, someone pointed out that in order for me to have milk, cows had to be pregnant. And, I'm ashamed to say, but somehow I just never made that connection. And I just thought how terrible that is. And so I vowed from that moment on to go vegan. And, and so, yeah, I would say my foray into veganism was primarily ethical. And for that reason, similar to Chef AJ, I was also eating mostly junk food. And it wasn't until my now wife and I started listening to Dr. Greger's How Not to Die that I take a whole food plant-based diet very seriously. And so we had a long road trip to Bend, Oregon, and listened to all 17 hours during the course of that trip. And I was completely convinced by the end. And I'm proud to say that probably 80 to 90% of my diet now is whole food plant-based.
Great. Okay, would each of you like to just take a minute to just make any closing thoughts or comments or anything that you'd like to leave us with regarding whole food plant-based diets and your philosophy or anything else? Derek, you want to start?
I'd be happy to, thanks. Essentially, don't overcomplicate, don't overthink it. I think we've mentioned nutritional reductionism, like what is this or that amino acid or this or that type of fatty acid or lectins or phytates or whatever. Just keep it simple. If you eat whole plant foods, you're going to feel great. You're going to get healthier. You're going to improve your athletic performance, your physique, your long-term health. So just eat the 4 food groups that Chef AJ keeps mentioning: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and beans. Eat as many of those as you can all day long, to the point where they displace other foods. Because the vast majority of people I work with are not vegan or vegetarian, but I'm always pushing them to eat a little more plants and a little more plants and a little more plants. And that's how I approach it: is every time you eat a plant instead of something else, it's a win. And so look at it that way. Same thing with exercise. Move your body, get as many steps as you can every day, regardless of what kind of health or conditioning you're in. Just about everyone can walk, just about everyone can move. Do some kind of resistance training if you're able to. Even if you're in a bed, in a chair, you can use your arms, because these things have profound impacts on not just your physical health, but your mental health. You will be a healthier, happier, more well-rounded person who will live longer and be able to spend more time with your family. So keep it simple and just keep going day after day.
Karthik, you have any closing thoughts for you?
Yeah, I think one thing that really helped is just learning new recipes and using it as an opportunity to try things that wouldn't normally try. Things like stir fries, maybe like a falafel platter or a Moroccan stew, and that way you can have more fun with it. It doesn't seem limiting if you just take your existing diet. Let's say you're on an omnivore diet and you just slash things out of it, and then you're just left with what's left that's whole food plant-based. It would seem pretty meager. And I think instead it's better just to explore, and that way you can have more fun while doing so.
Thank you. Chef AJ, your closing thoughts?
Well, everything these 2 fine gentlemen said, but just don't be afraid to eat starch. I see this all the time with people. They become vegan or vegetarian and they think all we eat is fruits and vegetables. Those are delicious and nutritious. They're very low in calorie density and can help you lose weight. But without the starch, you won't be full, because what happens is when you take out the meat and the oil, you're taking out the caloric density. And if you don't put something filling in, which is the starch, the potatoes, the winter squashes, the rice, the beans, all the whole grains, the corn, you are going to be hungry. And so one of the problems I see is people don't eat enough. That's why they say I got so tired when I was vegan, was because you weren't eating enough food. You weren't eating enough calories. So please don't be afraid of starch. Potatoes don't make you fat. It's what you put on them that does. So enjoy nature's bounty. I think that sometimes people focus and they obsess about this minutia, these tweaks and these, how many, you have to get this in. Just eat plants. It doesn't matter the combination. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. Don't complicate it. Eat what you like. Try to expose yourself to new foods as well. But if you can't find a community, I see so many people in the chat saying nobody eats like me. So I've been typing suggestions like joining a meetup group or starting a meetup group. But this is the best thing you can do for your health, for the animals and the planet. And I hope you'd at least give it a try.
Karthik, how can we stay in touch with you if we want to get your book, if we want to follow up with you? Do you have a website? How do we stay in touch with you?
Yes, aftermeetbook.com is the book website. And yeah, there's a way to contact me there. I would actually say the best social media I have is LinkedIn, actually. So if you just search my name on LinkedIn, I should pop right up.
Great, thank you. Chef AJ, if we want to get your books or follow up with you, what's the best way to follow you and your work?
Thank you. My website is chefaj.com. My email is help@chefaj.com. You can find me every single day on YouTube. I'm there live. I'm answering questions in the chat while my guests are speaking. I'm on pretty much all social media platforms, YouTube and Facebook as Chef AJ, Twitter and Instagram as The Real Chef AJ, but YouTube is kind of where I've been living my life. And I do conferences in person and virtually. So if you sign up for my newsletter, you get some recipes and we can stay connected. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Stephen. I really appreciate your work.
Thank you. And Derek, do you do anything online, or all your nutrition consultations in person? How does it work with you?
The vast majority is in person now. Kind of as a reaction to being all online from COVID, I've gone in that direction. So anybody passing through Richmond, Virginia, please stop into my gym. That would be delightful. But you can also visit me at veganmuscleandfitness.com. You can purchase our ebook there, the Vegan Muscle and Fitness Guide to Bodybuilding Competitions, if you want to learn more of the nuts and bolts of training to maximize muscle mass, minimize body fat on a plant-based diet. We also have tons of free articles on nutrition, tons of free articles on training. You can find us on social media at veganmuscle.com on Facebook and Instagram. And like I said, if you're ever in town in Virginia, stop by. I love meeting people, would love to work with people, and get in touch.
What's the name of your gym?
Brute Force Personal Training.
Brute Force Personal Training. In what city in Virginia?
Richmond, Virginia. And it's root like a carrot. So ROOT. Brute Force Personal Training in Richmond, Virginia.
I thought you said brute force.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny.
Okay. Thank you all very much for sharing your time and your wisdom. We all appreciate very much. And we look forward to your individual lectures.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.